Hello everyone. Okay, if you're new to gas-powered bicycles, say you've purchased one and you don't know anything about them, or you're at home, a do-it-yourself person, and you don't understand how to get the chain in there, or you have a bike and you're trying to replace the chain or adjust the chain, hopefully this video will answer some questions for you. Today I'm going to show you how to remove a chain and reinstall the chain. That way it covers both aspects for the person that has a bike and needs to maintenance the chain or change it, and it will show you also for a person that's building their own bike at home and doesn't quite get the concept of how to get the chain on there. Hopefully it takes care of that one too. All right, so let's get started. Okay, for this job we're going to need a few tools. On this particular bike I need the flat blade big screwdriver, a 14mm wrench, a 10mm wrench. I am needing the 5/16 for my chain guard. It's installed without the loop. It has a screw in it. The 19mm socket to turn my drive gear, the nut on my drive gear, which I will show you here in just a moment. And I personally use a small pair of channel locks for my master link. Some people use pliers. Everybody uses something different, but that's what we're using on this bike today. All right, let's get started. First, I'm going to remove the screw for the back of my chain guard, and then I'm going to remove this nut and washer to remove the chain guard to access the chain. Now that we've removed our chain guard, now we can see our chain plane and get in there to work on it. A little FYI, if you notice the black marks on the tire, this person did not have their rear wheel lined up correctly, and the chain could use a little adjustment. If you put a new chain on, or your bike is completely new, after about a gas tank full of riding, it is always a good idea to check your chain. It is your main functioning piece. If something happens to it, you're back to pedaling. On the worst case scenario, I have seen a lot of bikes in the past where the person didn't adjust the chain correctly, had a bunch of slop in it, and when I mean slop, I mean super sagging. Way worse than this chain here, but a little something that can happen to you as a rider. And it always happens when you're coasting, because the motor's turning slow and the bicycle is going fast. The chain has a bunch of slop in it, and what can happen is the chain can double itself up and get wedged inside of here with your drive gear. Now when that happens to you, it immediately locks up the back tire because it can't turn anymore. 90% of the time it snaps the chain, but it still locks you up a little bit before it snaps the chain. Sometimes it doesn't snap the chain at all, just stays wedged in there, and your back tire is completely locked up. So it is important to keep an eye on your chain and make sure it is in the neighborhood of the proper adjustment. Just a little FYI. All right, now I'm going to take my Phillips screwdriver and remove these 3 screws so I can have access to my drive gear. Now that we've removed the side panel, which is actually your actuator or throw out lever, we have full access to our drive gear. Now what we are going to do is remove our master link, which is that little guy right there. Another FYI, when installing your master link, you always want the round section riding the train roller coaster backwards. So basically what I'm saying, if you put your master link and chain together when the chain is on top, which is on top, you want the opening facing toward the rear. If you put your master link together on the bottom of the chain, you want your opening for your master link facing that way. You always want this guy riding the roller coaster toward the rear, or facing backwards, however you like to think about that. Why is because as the chain rotates that way, and if you have the mouth of the master link going the same way the chain is, it happens, it's seldom, but it does happen. It can catch on a piece of idler pulley or something. I've never personally witnessed it catching it, and pop the master link off and your chain falls off on you in the middle of the street and you're in bad shape. So that is just a little FYI on the master link. You always want the tail end of the master link, the opening end, to be facing away from the engine as it circles through. Okay, so let me get the master link off there. How I personally get the master link off is I take my pliers against the end of the clip and squeeze, and it pops it back and slides it back just like that. So now that I've removed my master link, as you can see, my chain is apart. Now is when I will take my 19mm socket, put it on my drive gear. That's why I removed the spark plug. It makes it so much easier to turn. And now my chain has been removed. Okay, to reinstall your chain, you will repeat the last step, just opposite. I like to start my chain from the bottom, so that way I'm always turning my nut that holds my drive gear on to make sure it's still tight. Watch not to pinch your fingers in here because it is real tight quarters. I put my fingertip on the side of the chain, rotate the engine, walk my chain as far as I want it, whatever it's easiest for me to access out there, and voila, our chain's installed, at least on our engine so far. So I will replace the cover with the clutch lever and then reinstall my master link. Alrighty then, now that I have my side panel back on with my clutch lever, I have reinstalled my master link. There's the little guy. Notice that I installed it on top, so I have the opening facing the rear. You always want the closed end riding on the roller coaster backwards. So if it's on the top like I installed it, you want the closed end facing the engine. If you install this on the bottom chain, sorry about that, on the bottom chain, you will want this end facing the rear of the bike. Alright, so one more step, adjusting our idler pulley. This one has been marked in the very beginning in case you have a flat tire and you don't need adjustment to your chain. It's nice to mark it with a marker or a pen or paint, and that way it's less guesswork when you reinstall your wheel and set your chain tension. But in this case, our chain's got a little wear on it, so it's relaxed a little bit. All new chains do that. That's why it is important to keep an eye on that. The chains do stretch through time and wear and tear, and it's important to have a chain that is not super tight like a banjo string, but has a little bit of play to it, because we want it to pull on the wheel to rotate it, but not to put a bunch of pressure on the output shaft of our engine or the rear bearings of our bicycle wheel. So that is why you do not want it super tight. So I will take my 14mm wrench. This bike, the chain guard is already removed, but we will take our straight blade screwdriver to hold this side, and we will move the pulley up to apply just a little bit more tension to it to make sure she doesn't have any slack, so this chain does not bind up in the motor as I mentioned earlier. It is real important, because if you have a lot of slop in your chain, that's going to happen to you. And when that does, sometimes the chain bunches up in that little compartment. Then you have to take a little hammer and chisel or whatever it is you have available to knock the chain out of there so you can replace your chain. Just unnecessary work if you can possibly avoid it. So I already have my wheel lined up, so now when the bike is riding, the chain won't have a lot of slop in it, and or it won't be hitting the tire. As you can see in the past, his chain had a little slop in it by the oil marks on the tire. It was touching the tire. That is one of the signs you need to do a little adjustment on your chain or wheel for alignment. Alright, well, I am going to adjust this chain and wrap this up so I can show you about what kind of slack you want in your chain. Put the guard back on it and the chain should be all wrapped up. So as you can see, I have loosened the idler pulley, slid it up just a little bit. It's just that far out of the marks. That's how much it is stretched and relaxed since it was brand new a few summers ago. I don't know how much riding this bike gets, but that's pretty good for a couple years, couple summers. Alright, like I said, you do not want your chain so binding tight, but you also don't want it sagging either. 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch play is 100% adequate. It's not tight and putting excess stress on the output shaft bushing or the rear wheel bearings. It is always a great idea to look down the side of your chain, make sure it is aligned, not touching the frame. As you can see, we have some daylight between the wheel and the chain, so it shan't be rubbing anymore. And then you install your chain guard, which I will not drag you through. I will wrap this up here. That is pretty much the summary of getting your chain installed. Like I said, if you're new to bikes and need to change your chain or work on it for whatever reason or adjust it, hopefully this helped you out. everybody's chain guard gets mounted differently, so like I said, I won't bore you through that part. Okay, well, hopefully this answered someone's question that was having some chain problems or had a question about how much tension and haven't caught one of my other videos. Okay, well, you people ride safe out there. Keep an eye out for cars because they don't keep an eye out for you. And stay tuned for my next helpful gas-powered bike video. Alright, see you folks later.